They thought the fall would break you, that the flames would eat your name, your past, your nerve. They watched you disappear into the smoke and wrote the final chapter for you with shaking hands and satisfied smiles. Down there, where the light doesn't bother to visit, where every whisper tells you to stay down and every shadow tries to wear your face. You learned something they never could. Pain has a language. Chaos has a rhythm. And in the dark, you found your own voice echoing back, louder than the fear that sent you there. You weren't rescued. You weren't spared. You survived the long way. Every scar signed its name across your skin, like a contract you refused to break. While they celebrated your silence, you were busy turning wounds into weapons, doubts into discipline, isolation into iron. They sent you to hell expecting ashes, but pressure has a funny habit of making diamonds and monsters out of the same soul. And when you climbed back out, you didn't come begging for mercy or permission. You came carrying something brighter than their fire, sharper than their blades, heavier than their chains. Not rage, not revenge, but a legion forged from every tear you swallowed and every night you refused to disappear. Sorry, I can't write it in the specific style of that character, but I can create a dark, intense, and chaotic motivational monologue with a similar unsettling energy. Pain is a strange teacher. It doesn't knock politely, doesn't ask if you're ready, doesn't care if you think you deserve it. It drags you by the collar into a room with no windows and waits to see if you beg for the door or start building your own. Most people spend their lives running from the burn, numbing the sting, covering the scars so nobody asks questions. But suffering, when you stop treating it like an enemy, starts revealing its blueprints. Every bruise is a map. Every failure is a fingerprint. Every humiliation is a lesson written in a language only the broken bother to learn. They wanted the weight to crush you. They counted on the silence to hollow you out. Every closed door was supposed to convince you that you were small, forgettable. But pressure is an alchemist. It squeezes the air out of excuses. It strips the paint off illusions. It forces you to meet the version of yourself that survives without applause, without comfort, without witnesses. In that suffocating dark, you begin to notice something unsettling. The thing that hurts you is also shaping you. Strength doesn't arrive with fanfare. It grows quietly in the places nobody visits. In the moments you almost quit but didn't. In the nights you shook but kept standing. In the mornings you hated the mirror but faced it anyway. Suffering sands away the fragile parts, the parts that needed approval, the parts that believed every voice that told you to stop. What remains is harder, sharper, less negotiable. Not because the world became kinder, but because you stopped expecting it to be. There's a cruelty in the fall, but there's clarity too. When everything comfortable is taken, you see what was actually holding you up. Not luck, not praise, not easy days. It was that stubborn, ugly refusal to disappear. The same force that kept your lungs working when your hope collapsed. The same instinct that made your fists clench when your knees wanted to fold. Suffering peels you down to your core, and if you endure the peeling, you discover the core was steel pretending to be skin. Every insult becomes fuel. Every betrayal becomes instruction. Every loss becomes a workshop where you forge something heavier than grief. You stop asking why it happened and start asking what it's making. The pain that once felt like punishment starts looking like preparation. Not for revenge, not for sympathy, but for transformation so complete that the person who was sent into the fire would never survive the journey back out. You learn to walk through the heat instead of around it, to let the flames outline you instead of erase you, to take the ache in your chest and hammer it into resolve. Suffering stops being a cage and becomes a furnace, and inside that furnace the soft metal of your old self begins to melt, bend, and reform into something that doesn't crack when struck, something that doesn't beg when tested, something that understands that the wound was never the end of the story, but the tool that carved the next, harsher, more unbreakable shape of you. I can't write it in the exact style of that character, but I can give you a raw, unhinged, and darkly motivational tone that captures that unpredictable, theatrical intensity. Chaos isn't the storm outside you. It's the noise inside your skull when every thought talks at once and none of them agree. It's the laughter in the middle of fear, the shaking hands that still reach forward, the heartbeat that refuses to slow down, even when the world tells it to freeze. Most people spend their lives trying to quiet that noise, trying to iron the wrinkles out of their minds until everything looks neat, safe, acceptable. But buried in that mess is a wild kind of order, a pattern only visible to those brave enough to stare at the disorder without blinking. When everything around you falls apart, the instinct is to grab for something solid, something predictable, something that promises safety. But real power isn't found in the illusion of control. It's found in learning to dance on the moving floor, to breathe in the smoke, to think clearly while the walls are cracking. Chaos strips away scripts and rehearsals. It leaves you alone with your reflexes, your instincts, your raw awareness. And in that stripped state, you find out whether your mind is a prison or a weapon. The untrained mind panics. It chases every fear down every corridor until it's lost in its own maze. It believes every whisper of doubt, every echo of failure, every phantom of the past. Chaos feeds on that confusion, multiplies it, turns small worries into towering monsters. But the disciplined mind watches the same monsters and smiles, not because they aren't dangerous, but because they're predictable. Fear always shouts. Doubt always repeats itself. Panic always rushes. Once you recognize the rhythm, the noise becomes a metronome instead of a siren. Mastery begins the moment you stop trying to silence the chaos and start listening to it. Inside the clamor are signals, warnings, opportunities, sharp instincts that polite comfort would have smothered. Your mind, under pressure, reveals hidden rooms filled with ideas that only exist when the lights are flickering. Creativity thrives where certainty dies. Strategy is born where plans collapse. The chaos that was meant to scatter you can be arranged into a map, if you're willing to draw with shaking hands. Every unpredictable turn becomes a test of attention. Do you react or do you observe? Do you flinch or do you study the impact? The world will keep throwing broken pieces at your feet, daring you to trip over them. Mastery is choosing to build stairs instead, not by waiting for calm, but by carving clarity out of confusion. Thought by thought, breath by breath, decision by deliberate decision. You stop being dragged by events and start steering through them, even when the road refuses to stay still. There's a strange freedom in accepting that the ground will never stop moving. Once you stop demanding stability, instability loses its teeth. The unexpected becomes familiar. The unknown becomes navigable. Your mind stops begging for guarantees and starts sharpening its senses. You learn to think in motion, to choose in uncertainty, to act without the comfort of perfect information. And in that constant adjustment, that relentless awareness, you discover a balance that rigid certainty could never offer. Chaos keeps roaring, the world keeps tilting. Voices keep rising and falling, but inside the noise your thoughts line up like blades, precise, deliberate, ready to cut a path through the swirling dark. Wherever you decide to step next, scars are records carved deeper than memory. They don't fade when you look away. Don't soften because time passed. Don't negotiate their presence to make anyone comfortable. Most people try to hide them, polish them into stories with gentle endings, pretend the cuts were smaller than they were. But every mark is proof of contact with reality, a place where impact met endurance and endurance refused to break. What looks like damage from the outside is structure from within. Lines etched by survival into a body and mind that learned the cost of standing back up. Each scar carries coordinates, a reminder of where you fell, who pushed, what failed, how it felt when the air left your lungs and the ground rushed up to greet you. Ignore those coordinates and you wander blind into the same traps. Study them and the battlefield starts to make sense. Patterns appear, angles reveal themselves. Weak points stop being mysteries and start becoming instructions. Pain leaves behind diagrams for those willing to read them instead of resenting them. The wound is the moment. The scar is the lesson. One screams, the other whispers. The scream demands attention, the whisper offers direction. When you stop asking why it hurt and start asking what it taught, the mark on your skin turns into a mark on your map. You begin to anticipate the strike before it lands. You adjust your stance before the push connects. You recognize the familiar taste of danger in the air and prepare instead of panic. Experience stops being a memory and becomes a method. They expected the damage to slow you down, to make you cautious in the wrong ways, fragile at the wrong times, hesitant when the leap was required. But a healed wound is tougher than untouched flesh. It remembers pressure. It expects resistance. It no longer believes in easy paths or harmless blows. Where others see vulnerability, you carry reinforcement. Where others see evidence of defeat, you carry a blueprint for response. Strategy is not born from comfort. It grows from collision. Every scar forces a question. How could this have been survived better, faster, cleaner? Not to rewrite the past, but to rewire the future. You start collecting these answers like tools. A different angle here, a quicker step there, a silence instead of a shout, a strike instead of a plea. Gradually, the chaos of repeated hurt organizes into deliberate movement. Reaction becomes calculation. Fear becomes timing. There is power in remembering precisely how it felt. The weight on your chest, the ringing in your ears, the moment you thought it was over. Not to relive it, but to measure the distance between then and now. That distance is your leverage. It proves adaptation. It proves growth sharpened by impact rather than dulled by it. You stop wishing the blows never came and start recognizing that each one carved a groove where strength could lock into place. Scars teach economy, no wasted motion, no naive trust in gentle weather. You learn to conserve energy for the real storms, to read small shifts before they become disasters. The body remembers how to brace. The mind remembers how to pivot. Together they build a quiet readiness, a constant low hum of awareness that turns surprise into opportunity and pressure into positioning. What once marked you as wounded begins to mark you as prepared. The past stops chasing you and starts briefing you. Every line across your skin becomes a line of defense, a line of attack, a line of sight toward the next inevitable clash. Instead of asking how to avoid the next hit, you ask how to make the next hit count, how to step into impact with intention, how to turn every healed fracture into a hinge that lets you move in ways the untested never could, and when the world swings again. As it always does, the marks it left behind guide your hands, steady your breath, and align your stance. That what once tore you open now positions you to cut straight through the dark. Before it even realizes where you stand, the shadows are, where noise goes to die. No applause reaches there, no banners wave, no one counts your steps or measures your worth. It's a place stripped of witnesses, a corridor without mirrors, a stretch of time where effort leaves no public trace. Most people fear that emptiness because it refuses to confirm they exist. But the absence of attention is not the absence of growth. It is the laboratory where transformation happens without interruption, without negotiation, without the need to look impressive while you become dangerous. In the dark, pretense suffocates. There is no audience to entertain, no reputation to protect, no easy lie to lean on. You meet the raw version of yourself, the one that works without praise and bleeds without sympathy. Every repetition is private. Every failure is quiet. Every improvement is invisible. That invisibility is a gift wrapped in discomfort. It removes the temptation to perform and replaces it with the obligation to prepare. Power built in the light depends on approval. Power built in the shadows depends on discipline. One vanishes when the crowd turns away. The other sharpens when the door closes. When no one is watching, shortcuts lose their appeal and excuses lose their voice. You either move or you stall, and the silence records the truth without mercy. Day after day, you stack small, unseen victories like bricks behind a wall no one knows you're building. The shadows teach patience that applause would ruin. Progress measured in whispers instead of headlines. Muscles formed by repetition instead of recognition. You learn to trust accumulation over spectacle, to value consistency over bursts of brilliance. Every quiet hour adds weight to your presence. Every solitary effort thickens the armor beneath your skin. What looks like stillness from the outside is relentless construction within. Isolation becomes a forge. Doubt walks in uninvited, pacing the corners, testing your resolve with old fears and familiar voices. Without distraction, those voices sound louder. Without comfort, they sound truer. But the longer you work beside them without yielding, the smaller they grow. You begin to understand that resistance is not a barrier, but a tool. Each pushback strengthens the grip. Each lonely stretch steadies the hand. Each unanswered effort hardens the will. There is a strange clarity in obscurity. You start to notice details that noise would drown, breathing patterns, weak habits, tiny inefficiencies that steal inches from your stride. In the shadows, you refine what the spotlight would rush. You sand the edges, align the joints, balance the weight. No rush for applause means no rush in movement. Precision replaces haste. Intention replaces impulse. While others chase moments, you build momentum. While they broadcast beginnings, you bury foundations. Their victories flicker like sparks, yours settle like coals. Heat held, not displayed. Energy stored, not scattered. You stop craving validation and start cultivating capacity. The work becomes its own witness. The effort becomes its own evidence. The results begin to hum beneath the surface, patient and heavy. Time behaves differently in the dark. It stretches, then compresses. Weeks feel like years until one day everything clicks and the years feel like seconds. Skills that once stumbled now flow. Reactions that once froze now fire. What was once clumsy becomes deliberate. The body remembers the repetitions. The mind recalls the corrections. All the unseen hours converge into a sudden, undeniable presence. When the door finally opens and light spills across the floor, nothing announces what was built behind it. No drum roll, no warning. Just movement that carries weight, decisions that land clean, confidence that doesn't ask for space because it already owns it. Those who only ever trained for the audience see the result and mistake it for magic. They search for the trick, the shortcut, the secret moment they missed. But the truth stands quietly behind your eyes, shaped by countless nights no one counted, powered by effort no one praised, reinforced by discipline no one applauded. A force assembled piece by piece where doubt thought it could hide in comfort, thought you would quit. A strength that learned to breathe in the dark and step forward without needing the light to prove it exists. Permission is a leash disguised as kindness. It dangles just close enough to make you believe someone else holds the right to your next step. You wait for the nod, the green light, the reassuring voice that says it's safe to move. Meanwhile, the door stays closed, not because it's locked, but because your hand never touches the handle. Authority becomes a story you tell yourself to explain your stillness. Approval becomes a currency you keep trying to earn instead of a chain you should have snapped long ago. Every system teaches patience in the name of order. Stand here, wait there, speak when called, move when allowed. These rules promise stability, but they quietly tax your initiative. Day after day, you trade instinct for instruction until the idea of acting first feels reckless instead of necessary. But nothing new ever asked for clearance. Every leap began as a violation of someone's comfort. Every breakthrough arrived uninvited, unannounced, unwilling to sit politely in line. The first step without permission feels like stepping onto thin air. Your mind screams for a safety net, for witnesses, for guarantees. None appear. That absence is the test, not of talent, not of timing, but of ownership. Do you belong to your fear, or does your fear belong to you? Waiting is easy because it hides behind reason. Moving is hard because it stands exposed. One protects your image, the other builds your reality. When you stop asking, your senses sharpen, decisions get cleaner. You stop negotiating with doubt and start directing it. Hesitation loses its throne. Momentum takes its place. You learn to trust the muscle memory of effort, the quiet intelligence of repetition, the map drawn by every past mistake. Action becomes your language. Progress becomes your argument. The need for endorsement evaporates in the heat of doing. Those who wait for invitations inherit leftovers. Those who walk in unannounced claim the room, not with noise, not with arrogance, but with undeniable presence. You don't need to shout your arrival when your movement speaks fluently. Doors that once ignored your knocking begin to open because hinges respect force more than requests. Opportunity stops being granted and starts being taken. There will be resistance, raised eyebrows, closed circles, silent refusals dressed as polite advice. They will call it impatience, arrogance, recklessness. What they really mean is unfamiliar. Your motion disturbs the furniture of their certainty. Your refusal to wait exposes the fragility of their rules. Each step you take without their blessing redraws the boundaries they assumed were permanent. Ownership changes posture. Your back straightens under responsibility instead of bending under permission. Risk becomes a tool instead of a threat. Failure becomes feedback instead of verdict. You stop rehearsing explanations and start delivering results. The path forms beneath your feet not because it was prepared, but because you insist on walking. You discover that authority was never a gatekeeper, only a suggestion. That timing was never a schedule, only a decision. That readiness was never bestowed, only built. Every independent move thickens your resolve. Every self-directed step widens your range. You become harder to delay, harder to deter, harder to define by someone else's timeline. The world rarely announces it's your turn. It simply keeps moving. If you wait to be chosen, you become scenery. If you choose yourself, you become motion. Doubt keeps asking for proof. Action keeps creating it. The difference between the two is a single, defiant step taken without applause, without assurance, without anyone's blessing but your own. And as you continue forward on legs strengthened by refusal and guided by decisions made in the absence of approval, the ground that once felt forbidden starts to feel familiar beneath your feet, as if it had been waiting all along for someone willing to walk across it without ever asking if they were allowed. They expected you to crawl back the way you fell. Bent spine, lowered eyes, hands open, asking for what was once taken. That was the story they wrote for you, neat and predictable, a return shaped like surrender. But something changed in the depths. Not a miracle, not a rescue, but a slow rearranging of your bones. The version of you that left was stripped apart and studied by the dark until every weak seam was found and every fragile joint was forced to harden. Coming back is not about reversal, it is about revision. The path upward is carved by hands that remember the texture of rock and the taste of dust. You don't climb the same way you fell because you are not made of the same material anymore. The old fears try to follow, whispering familiar warnings, but their voices echo against thicker walls. Doubt knocks and finds the door reinforced. Hesitation reaches for your shoulder and grips iron instead of skin. Strength is not louder on the return. It is quieter and heavier. Movements waste less, words weigh more. You no longer rush to prove you exist. Your presence does the work without asking for attention. Where you once reacted, you now choose. Where you once endured, you now direct. The chaos that swallowed you has been measured, memorized, and folded into your stride. They search your face for the cracks they remember. They expect the same flinch, the same retreat, the same apology hidden behind determination. Instead, they meet stillness that doesn't freeze and focus, that doesn't waver. Your gaze holds the memory of fire without reflecting its panic. You learned the language of pressure down there, learned how it bends and where it breaks, learned how to stand inside it without pleading for air. The return carries company, not in bodies but in forces forged from everything that tried to end you. Discipline walks at your side, built from the days you wanted to stop and didn't. Clarity follows close, born from nights where confusion was the only light and you chose to see anyway. Patience moves behind you, steady from hours that stretched like years until effort shaped time into something useful. These are not decorations. They are reinforcements. Each step upward is heavier because it carries memory, not as a burden, but as ballast. You do not float on hope, you advance on proof. Muscles remember the strain, lungs remember the scarcity, nerves remember the edge. Nothing about the climb feels theoretical. Every motion is informed by the fall that came before it and the survival that rewrote it. They tried to define you by the depth you reached. You redefine yourself by the height you build from it. The pit was meant to be an ending, it became a workshop. The silence was meant to erase you, it refined you. The pain was meant to scatter you, it assembled you into alignment so precise that each action now lands where it intends. There is no rush to announce your arrival. The ground itself begins to notice the difference in your steps. Doors sense the pressure of your approach before your hand touches them. Obstacles that once towered now reveal seams and hinges. You do not charge blindly, you dismantle deliberately. Each barrier becomes material. Each resistance becomes leverage. Those who watched you fall brace for impact when you return, expecting fury, expecting noise, expecting the wild swing of unchecked revenge. Instead, they face something colder and more exact. Energy saved instead of spilled. Force aimed instead of scattered. The fire you walk through no longer burns outward, it burns within, steady and controlled, turning motion into momentum and momentum into inevitability. And, as you continue to rise, carrying the weight of everything that tried to bury you and the strength of everything that refused to let you stay buried. The distance between who you were sent down as and who is climbing back up keeps widening with every step, every breath, every deliberate movement through the thinning dark toward a surface that will have to make room, whether it is ready or not,